Mikhail, thank you for joining us. Do I call you Mikhail Carmack?
I don't care.
You don't care?
I don't care.
We'll go with Carmack then. For the people who only know you as the guy who gives the opening speech at IEM Katowice, what is your role within ESL?
Taking credit, just taking credit. I have a big Twitter account, people know me, and I just take credit for things. No, I used to run Intel Extreme Masters hands-on. I used to be the product manager of it. I've taken a step away from that directly. I am the VP of product development at ESL. That means I, let's say, design, redesign our products, so how our structures work, how our tournaments connect to each other, what they should look like in order to be at their possible best.
How does it feel to be back on LAN and in Katowice and with an arena full of people?
You know, this is a moment that we've been waiting for 3 years, because we lost one event to some degree with a decision from the local government of the Silesia region that we were not allowed to bring in audience due to the pandemic at all. It was at the very start of the pandemic. It was profoundly dreadful, I would say. The year after, we did it online, just because we didn't think we could get all the players together to one place. You know, that cliched phrase, you don't know what you have till it's gone. Now it feels absolutely amazing. It's just terrific. And it's the way esports is supposed to be. If you take a step back and rewind the clock a good number of years, almost a decade, this is where major arena Counter-Strike was born, really. And this is a place and an event, and maybe not the event, maybe the fans have redefined what the dreams of esports players look like, and they redefined our purpose as ESL, at ESL, for what we think we should be doing in this world. And it got taken away from us for 2 really long years, and it was painful, it was dreadful, it was depressing. And now it's back, and we will enjoy every second of it, because we know now what it feels like not to have it.
How have those past 2 years influenced you and ESL in the way you look at organizing events like this?
Well, first of all, you can't take anything for granted anymore, and you have to be ready for bad stuff happening. We had the pandemic. For this event, what we did, you know, in hindsight, it was too cautious, but, you know, at the time it seemed like a fantastic decision. We were very, very strict with COVID rules for the event, with, you know, hey, you have to have a vaccination passport, you have to have all this. We, together with our partners, we made the decision not to have the expo, because the expo was never supposed to be ticketed, just to make sure that the event, in case something changes, you know, with the pandemic and with the politics around it, that then the event was as stable as possible, and that any potential changes with regulation would not be dramatically affecting the event. So these are the things that we have began employing in how we approach events, and maybe we were too cautious, but it's better to be cautious than to have a potentially disastrous outcome of an event that isn't in our hands necessarily.
There is a new visual identity for IEM Katowice, but being here still feels like it's very typical IEM Katowice, the way the stage looked, the format, everything. When you see other tournament organizers like Blast sort of flip the table on how they approach organizing events and the way they structure their tournament, does that perhaps nudge you towards thinking like maybe we should also flip the table on our approach?
I think that would imply that we would reconsider and thought that all the values that we designed our events around are the wrong values. It's not always possible, because, you know, designing through values is the long-term view, and sometimes there is the short-term economic view that also influences the way you do things. But for the most part, we want to be designing things through our values. And our values are that, as the biggest tournament organizer in the space, we want to be involving multiple teams, as many as we can feasibly involve in the event, because ultimately if we have a limited number of teams that are able to participate and derive value from their participation in Intel Extreme Masters, then how are they going to then generate salaries for players in the ecosystem? That influences the difficulty level with which we operate, because we have, we had 16 teams at one moment, and at one moment we have 3 streams going on, which is far more complex and difficult and requires far more attention and resources than running a single stream that is fully geared maybe perhaps to running a perfectly clean show. As for the stage in Katowice, we do not want to be redesigning it, because the show isn't about the stage. The stage is a canvas for the players to express themselves on, and it's also become a part of the brand of the event because it's iconic. You take a picture of that stage and you show it to any esports fan in the world, they're going to say, oh, that's IEM Katowice. That's recognizable. So that is not something where we think we need to tinker, because again, it's much more supposed to be the backdrop for the players to compete on, rather than the centerpiece of the show itself.
This year we had 24 teams compete in Katowice. Is that the maximum, or is a 32 team event possible?
It depends on what profile you're looking for, because for us, to some degree, it's especially in the pandemic times. You have to consider visas, you have to consider multiple other things, you have to consider the hotel space that you have, and you have to consider your budget, which is not made of, it's not rubber, you can't just stretch it. So in terms of feasibility, there have been events in the past for Counter-Strike 1.6 or even 1.5, where there have been dozens of teams in a hotel ballroom. Our values are to have a blend, a hybrid between a good show and something that is a culmination of a story and the culmination of hard work of multiple teams that get involved, rather than it being strictly an epic bullet of a show like Blast 2. And coming from that angle, I think they are superior to us. Coming from our angle, we are very happy in the place that we're in. And now, this year, we plan to gradually improve our quality and really deliver a much improved product as well.
In the 2022 Pro Tour, we see a return of international competition to, let's say, the smaller regions, the Americas, Asia, Oceania. Do you feel that there is still an interest from local partners in participating in organizing those events? Or do you think that perhaps the love for Counter-Strike has somewhat cooled down?
Well, it's always, when it comes to regions, it's a bit of a chicken and egg question, because if you have superstars that inspire the fans, you're going to have more fans. If you don't have those superstars, you're not going to have fans. So, and if certain regions have been isolated for a while or haven't had the opportunity to show themselves on an international scale, then obviously that shrinks that community later on. And that, when making that decision, you have to kind of judge on potential rather than on what you see today. And judging on potential is always a thing that is, not a guaranteed thing necessarily. It's kind of like an investment rather than a sure thing. And it's a complicated question. I don't want to be talking about regions that I don't know very much about as if I'm the expert, because you should really be asking that question to the people that run esports in those regions that you're thinking of. Yeah, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth and say something stupid just because I'm not knowledgeable enough.
That's fair enough. In the past years, we've seen a steady growth in viewer base, in fan engagement. How close do you think that CS is to its peak?
I think it depends how you measure the peak, right? So depending on which aspects you choose to measure, you can come out with a pessimistic view, a balanced view, or an optimistic view. If you look at metrics for this event, we've had fantastic viewership for the group stage so far. A lot of people tuned in because a lot of people are still hungry and yearning to see that, the big show version of Counter-Strike. On the other hand, we see, I think, currently on current form, North American teams are not doing as well as they used to do. We had Team Liquid with the Intel Grand Slam. We had Cloud9 with CSGO Major, with playing in the final of ESL One Cologne. And those teams, I think, mostly through the impact of the pandemic, are not doing as well as they used to, because just the fact that it was an open circuit allowed them to travel and allowed them to have that competitive experience against the top European teams, and allowed them to kind of level up to those European teams. Now, when they were more isolated, originally through the pandemic, when the regions were split and they were playing just in North America, Europe continued to grow and develop the play style and the meta game. North America got left behind a little bit. Then the players showed up to Europe and had to play, in a foreign country for multiple weeks, away from their homes, their families. And that is not a comfortable position to be in. So hopefully we are going to go back to a semblance of what we used to have before the pandemic, where the teams practice in North America but travel around and compete. And hopefully that will improve things. And we also want to do things in the ecosystem. We're currently discussing internally how do we improve the ecosystem in North America, because the narrative of North America versus Europe or other continents is very interesting, and historically in Counter-Strike it's driven a lot of the interest in it.
It was said that we want to revive NA, perhaps. Was there any discussion about doing that for Asia, for Oceania as well?
I think the best way to do these things, again, that's kind of the potential versus what we know could happen with more certainty. I think the way to correctly do this, at least within our means, is to provide opportunity consistently. So Intel Extreme Masters has consistently tried to provide opportunity for Asian teams to show up. Unfortunately, due to COVID-related things with their travel, one of the Chinese teams just didn't make it to here. We want to constantly provide as many opportunities to compete for teams from those regions as possible. That's why, for example, when we went to Australia with Intel Extreme Masters, we had a fantastic reception, because we had been holding qualifiers for Australians for years, and they knew the tournament and the brand very, very well. Yeah, the way we want to stimulate them is to provide opportunity, and whether or not teams decide to grind and try to compete, that's up to them. Obviously, we also try to go and visit different tournaments. We originally wanted, I think it was 2020, we actually announced the major in Rio for CSGO. Hopefully we will come back, so that's South America. We have always held events in Asia and also in China, but also other parts of Asia. We went to Australia 3 times, so I like to see us as the active participant in those regions. But for the most part, we want those teams to be consistently stimulated by having qualifiers to global events when they can travel into the places where we, those permanent fixtures that are on the calendar.
How much is Starcraft part of the identity of IEM Katowice? Or how much is hosting that event here next to the CSGO event part of the identity?
I think it's fair to say that Starcraft is integral part of the fabric of the event. We've had so many amazing memories here. The first tournament was kind of the first one where the fans showed us that the culture of Starcraft cheering in Poland which was absolutely top-notch and world-class. It doesn't happen very often where, you know, you have your last Polish participant eliminated from a sporting event in Poland by somebody German, and the German player getting, you know, a standing ovation with his name cheered. This type of stuff isn't common, right? You don't take that for granted. Then 2014, we had the winner-takes-all $100,000 event where we had the single elimination bracket, and SOS became, you know, Mr. $100,000, and then he's won it the same amount in other tournaments as well, different tournaments. And for several years now, this is the place where the global championship of Starcraft is awarded. That trophy now has grown to symbolize officially, after the WCS isn't run any longer, but the ecosystem is mostly around what we do. It's got the official Blizzard blessing for the world champion. And last year, the world champion, for the very first time, the Intel Extreme Masters champion, and for the second time, the world champion was a European. So Cyril won it at BlizzCon, and Reina won it in Katowice. So many fantastic, amazing memories, and I can't imagine this event without Starcraft.
In the perhaps the near future, there is a decision that has to be taken on if IEM Katowice will have that blessing going forward. Without looking at numbers, is that something that you would want to have?
So I have to say, and it was primarily me, I made a mistake in the past by discontinuing Counter-Strike 1.6 tournaments when Counter-Strike 1.6 was no longer as viable as it used to be outside of Europe. And I thought, okay, we have a global circuit and we need global games and not just European games. And in hindsight, I wish I had left Counter-Strike 1.6 in the European events at least, so we would have that continued legacy. I do not want us to make a decision that would be similar with Starcraft. So for as long as there are fans, for as long as there are players, for as long as the gameplay continues to amaze, I would like us to continue with Starcraft.
I know that you have to leave us very soon, so I want to end on a final question. If you have to describe the IEM Katowice experience, like both the CSGO event, the Starcraft event, in one word, what would that word be?
From whose perspective? My perspective, a fan's perspective, a player's perspective, it would be a different word every time.
Well, I assume that you're both fan and yourself, so.
I would say the one word which captures everything is magic. It's not only epic, it's not only touching sometimes, and we've had a number of touching moments, like Pasha bringing out the trophy, and all those memories flooding back. You know, he won the trophy there, he won the major, he won the Intel Extreme Masters as well a few years back. So it's the magic, it's the moments that people remember. So one word, magic.
Okay, let's end on that note. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.